Arrakis will become a true desolation without spice or maker. He who can destroy a thing has the real control of it.
Hello and welcome back to Rehydrate. This season we'll be reading and discussing Frank Herbert's Dune. This is season 7, episode 9, Canley, covering book 3, The Prophet, chapter 7 to 12 of the rest of the book, and this is the season finale. Those have varying levels of knowledge of this book in this series. My name is Dan, and I've read this book, and I also went back and watched the 1984 Dune because Patrick Stewart's in it.
Yay. My name is Talia. I have read the first 4 books of Frank Herbert's Dune. I have seen the 1984 and the 2000 miniseries, and it's been a delight to read along with the podcast all the way up until our season finale.
My name is Priya, and along with my co-hosts, I have just finished reading this book, and I have watched the newer film, and I will follow suit with Dan's suggestion and watch the older film too.
This is Amin. I have finished the first book with everyone else, and I have watched both the 1984 and 2021 films.
All right, well, I think let's just jump right into the plot summary.
Jessica observes with trepidation, as only she, and perhaps Aliyah, understand the true consequence of Paul embracing the role of Lisan al-Gaib, Messiah of the Fremen. After Gurney's misunderstanding about Jessica is resolved, Cheney is summoned from the deep desert, where she finds Paul catatonic, both dead and alive, having dared to drink a single drop of the poison known as the water of life. After a precarious revival, Paul awakens from his coma and forcefully drinks a full cup of the poison, and does not so much share, but bludgeon his new awareness on Jessica, showing more evidence that through his survival, he is the Bene Gesserit dream, the Kwisatz Haderach. A raid on Sietch Tabr has killed Paul and Cheney's son Leto, and taken Aliyah captive. Aliyah is no helpless captive, however, and uses her position in front of the Baron to administer Chekhov's gum Jabbar into his flesh, leaving him to die. Paul learns of this not through direct report, but by sensing Aliyah in his awareness. Paul leads the attack on Arrakeen. His strategy takes advantage of a loophole within the military accord of the Great Convention, prescribing the use of atomics being used against people. He deploys atomics on the shield wall, infuriating the Emperor. Once Paul and the Fremen are reinstated in Arrakeen, Thufir Hawat and Paul reunite briefly, and the man's final act is to sacrifice himself on a poison needle meant for Paul. Fremen forces do massive damage to the Harkonnens, and he himself faces the Emperor. He threatens to destroy the spice forever. Feyd-Rautha challenges Paul in his closest battle yet, but Paul again emerges victorious, and demands Princess Irulan as a bride and a path to the throne. Cheney and Paul's bond is strengthened as they settle into roles familiar to the reader, as Duke and concubine.
Okay, we don't have any new characters, I think, for this time, but let's kind of go over some of the ones that we hadn't been seeing very, very frequently, who do make a significant impact on this section. So we have Count Fenring, a genetic eunuch and a killer, one of the might-have-beens, an almost Kwisatz Haderach, crippled by a flaw in the genetic pattern. Hawat, rather than kill the son of the beloved Duke, gives his life for the Atreides one last time. Aliyah, the daughter of Leto and Jessica, and Paul's sister. Paul, the new troublesome Duke in the eyes of Feyd-Rautha, and Feyd-Rautha, the not Baron turned Baron.
So again, because this is the finale, I thought we could open it up to initial impressions of the whole section.
Yeah, I liked it. I mean, it seemed like a lot of stuff happened in a very short, like last time, I think you had asked us for, what am I thinking, like predictions of what's going to happen, right, for the end of the book. And I was like, well, probably a lot of stuff is going to happen, but it didn't seem like there's a lot of time to do it all. But they fit a lot into like a very small space. It seemed like there was like 2 chapters of kind of setup, I think. There was there's a whole chapter of them just like getting ready for the attack, right? Which was, I don't know, time could have been better spent, I think, doing that. But overall, like I really like this whole section. I feel like in the beginning of the book, I was kind of thrown with a lot of stuff I didn't understand, or like it was like too immersive into the world, right? But now I feel like by the time I ended this book, I really understood like, you know, a lot more things that are happening in the world and people's reasoning behind things and the lore behind things too.
So overall, I thought the ending was fine. It felt like it was setting up the sequels, to be honest with you. I kind of felt um like there's closure, but not real closure. And kind of like the end of the first Star Wars movie or the end of the 2021 Dune movie. So I felt a little duped by the ending, which, whatever, it's fine. Um, but yeah, other than that, I thought it was I thought the battle was interesting because I think he's it seemed like Paul was avoiding fighting for so long, and it was nice to actually have him go and do that. But yeah, that was my takeaway from all of this.
I think your impression is correct that if you really do want to find out what happens to Paul, to Jessica, to Aaliyah, um, Messiah of Dune Messiah, yeah, Dune Messiah, the next book is really sort of like an epilogue to the first book. It's a much shorter read, and I think it's not spoilery to say it picks up right where this book ends.
Yeah, I thought, I mean, perhaps I might have a little bit of a not so thrilled opinion of the ending of this. I thought that it was I didn't particularly enjoy Paul's character arc towards the end. I've got to be honest, like it felt I understand why it was written that way, but at the same time I felt like a lot of the times I had trouble connecting with his character. I think that as the book progresses further and further, we get further and further away from Paul as a sympathetic character necessarily, or as a character that we can relate to at all in terms of emotions, because there is slowly a turning off of emotions that happens. And I can tell that like he has those emotions within him, but it's like everything is very compartmentalized for him towards the end. And I think that it kind of like, and I guess we'll talk about this more as we talk about like the ending of the book, but it kind of like made me not feel too compelled to read the future books, because or like the sequels that there are, because I just felt like, are we just going to get more of this same Paul? Because I feel like he's just like become something entirely other. So, but I guess Talia can speak more to that once we get to that. But my initial impressions were I'm definitely glad that I read this book. It's definitely a book that everyone should read. But maybe I was expecting a little bit more for the ending.
I think Paul says as much with the compartmentalization. Like when he's talking to the Baron, he's like, "Well, you know, like the Duke wouldn't do it, but Paul Muad'Dib would do it." So like he embraces that himself. And yeah, it's also interesting. Like I think they also like I don't know, like comment on like how he also doesn't care about people as much as like an Atreides should. So I don't know if he's like fighting battles in his mind constantly or whatever, but. Yeah, the compartmentalization is definitely a thing that he embraces.
A perfect example of that in this chapter. There's a perfect example of like again showing he doesn't care about people as much as the Atreides do. There's sort of like a fake out reversal where Paul tells the Fremen to leave the equipment, and the Fremen get a little impatient and say like, "Oh, Fremen don't like to leave their equipment, Muad'Dib." And he says like, "Men are more important than equipment right now." And you're like, "Oh, is he like taking on the mantle of the Duke?" And then he immediately follows this up with, "We're soon gonna have more equipment than we know what to do with." Or equipment won't matter at all, which basically means like either I'm going to kill everyone in the emperor's palace and take and raid all their equipment, or I'm going to nuke the planet, destroy the spice, and it's moot point anyway. So not exactly a pivotal moment of becoming an Atreides Duke and caring more about men than valuable equipment.
I wish I had that quote in front of me, but I remember like Gurney like mentioning like thinking about it in his head, right? Like he's like, what kind of Atreides like would not care about people that much? I forgot. Like I think it's in that same context, and they're talking about like, yeah, blowing people up with atomics or whatever.
Yeah, I think that was Gurney who thought about like how Duke Leto would have handled that, right?
Yeah, I think that's right.
It's funny that Paul is the one who says, like, I'm my grandfather's son. Like he's trying to make connections further up the family tree than just being Leto's son. But Priya, yeah, I definitely do empathize with what you say about being less able to relate to Paul. And in fact, when I began the summary, I first began with Jessica observing this happening because she's actually someone through whom the audience is able to sort of still understand more, as opposed to just Paul accepts the role of Lisan Al Gaib. Paul does this, but like how those actions shape the people around him. Because in the same way, and I think we'll talk a little bit more about this, that his son is sort of used as a tool. Like obviously, none of us were mourning the loss of Paul and Cheney's son at all. But Paul himself is also kind of used as a tool, less as a character, definitely in the last section here.
And I'm glad you mentioned that the demise of Paul and Cheney's son, because I felt like I wanted to feel more for that, but I couldn't feel it because we never meet the son, and we don't even get any glimpse into Paul's feelings for his son. So I think that the reader can feel something for a character on the basis of what the other characters might be feeling about that character, especially if we haven't actually been introduced to that character. Of course, the loss of a child is like a very big loss, but it's almost as if little Leto exists just for the sake of existing, just for the sake of like letting us know, hey, he had a son and then now he's gone. And also it was like really off-putting to me how like Paul says to Cheney, I understand your pain, but there will be more sons. And I was just like, what? That is not what you say to a grieving mother. FYI.
I'm so glad you brought up this point because I already cleared and got permission to go on this tangent. But there is a perfect example of this exact situation done in a way that puts us into the shoes of the grieving father. And that's in Macbeth, when, as one of his schemes, he goes after the family of Macduff, another rival. And again, it's in this scene where we learn about their death that we sort of learn that they existed, or like just right before. So it's quite analogous. And instead, when the news is delivered to Macduff, he reads, "What, all my pretty chickens and their dam at one fell swoop?" Malcolm, the future king, bristles at him and says, "Dispute it like a man, like go fight, go kill them." And Macduff says, "I shall do it so, but I must also feel it as a man. I cannot but remember such things that were most precious to me. Did heaven look on and would not take their part? Sinful Macduff, they were all struck for thee. Not that I am, not for their own demerits, but for mine, fell slaughter on their souls. Heaven rest them now." He blames himself for his part in their death and for the violence that befell them because of who he is. He feels it as a man before he takes action, and people are able to relate to that far more than what Herbert does here in this section.
I think even in this book, there's another example of, Duke Leto being like so mad that like they even attempted the life of Paul, like when they tried to kill him back, way back in the beginning. And he was like, I don't think he was like outwardly angry about it. I don't think he ever said it out loud, but like he kept thinking it over and over again, right? They tried to take the life of his son. Yeah. And yeah, you really feel it, right? And like and Paul is like, well, what are you gonna do? We'll have more. Yeah, I think there's a whole bunch of those kind of like anticlimactic moments in this book, and as I was reading it, they're like you kind of just like skimmed like you're like trying to get to the end, or like you're just like, I gotta just get to this duel, right? And like like the part where like Gurney comes back, and like it should have been more. Like they kind of talked about it all book. And even like the part, Thufir as well, like they talked about like getting revenge on Jessica, and like, and after like like a little while, they're like, oh, okay, we're cool, whatever.
I felt the writer's struggle, like as you're saying, Dan, like he just needed to like keep it moving.
Yeah, it's like, do I want to like I can write another whole chapter on this, or just like, I mean, they spent like a decent amount of time, but like I don't know. It seemed like it was gonna be like a bigger deal.
It
And
does fall a little flat. Like she goes like, "Oh, this is a man who like the voice won't work on him, tricks won't work on him." And then Paul's like, "No, it wasn't her."
yeah, it seemed like should have been, I don't know. Yeah, it was a little bit more there, but I don't know. The other thing was Paul just waking up after, like he's like in a coma, and they brought Cheney down from the south, and like it's like this
Yeah,
whole
you had a
thing,
whole
and
list of anticlimactic moments. So this was
yeah,
the coma moment.
yeah, the coma is like,
That was
and,
definitely anticlimactic.
he was dead. He was like basically dead for 3 weeks, and like everyone thought he was dead, but like Jessica, like kept him alive. And then it was like, oh, he just wakes up, one drop, cool.
He just needs to
That's
like
it.
take a whiff of something and he's up.
Yeah,
The demands of his flesh are so little that he hasn't been taking in any nourishment in the famously comfortable environment of Arrakis, which is not difficult
yeah,
on the body at all, where you don't need any food or water for 3 weeks. He's just been
yeah.
lying there. That was a little tricky.
Maybe he dehydrated.
Gross. Rehydrate.
Yeah, they rehydrated Paul, and then yeah, became
Oh my
the
God, that fits so well because it has to do with water too. That was a
oh,
great connection. Great.
and
See,
then
we'll punch up the whole book. We'll
yeah,
release our version. Our sympathy to the writer's strike happening right now, obviously.
yeah. Fortunately, I don't think anyone else for part of the guild, so we're not crossing any picket lines right now. And the last thing I just thought, it was like Raban just gets killed off screen. I'm like, oh yeah, he died, no problem. Like he was like such a big force, it's like he
You're
was like,
just in love with the Harkonnens. Like you
well, he
just
was,
love
yeah.
every Harkonnen chapter and
Well, we
character.
got the Baron's like comeuppance, right? Like because we saw him get killed, and like that was like, oh, that's cool. Like I like the scene of like him. I like the explanation of him, like how like he's like falling on his side, but he's still like levitating off the ground like by an inch because of his suspensors.
Yeah.
And Raban is like, he's the one that's like going after all the Fremen and killing them, and like really like trying to putting the screws to him to like get out the spice all he can. And they're like, he just died. How?
Yeah.
By who? By why? Like,
Well, Raban just had major side character energy, so he's
yeah. But I mean, even like,
unimportant.
Cannon fodder.
yeah, even like Peter, he got like, he got a cool death. But yeah,
And I think the other part though is, and maybe I missed some time lapse here, but isn't Aaliyah supposed to be like 2 years old and she's out killing people, and like they just
yeah.
kind of gloss over that part too, that she's a 2-year-old murdering someone. But
I think they mentioned it. I don't know.
no,
Like,
I know they mentioned
yeah,
it, but it was, to me
I
it
think
seems
she is
it,
too. I think you're right.
yeah,
yeah,
she is. Yeah.
because when they film
She's
this, I
like a
don't know how
little
they're going to
Ewok
film.
or something. And
Yeah.
Well, yeah, at least in the 84 version of Dune, like, yeah, it's like it's not a 2-year-old, that's for sure, but she's definitely like really small. And the Baron's death in the 84 version is pretty hilarious.
yeah,
He, like,
regale us. You saw it really recently.
yeah, she does the same thing. She kills him, but like he gets on a suspensor, and he kind of like spins around, and then the wall gets blown off the ship, and then he like goes out into space, or I don't know, wherever, outside the ship, right? But yeah, it's a lot more comical than the 84 version.
I think that's probably why that version is castigated, because some parts are like pretty corny.
I thought it was pretty good. I mean, like, I don't want to have a whole tangent on that, but like everyone like said it's like so weird, and like I don't know, I was expecting like really like crazy like
Our
Lynchian
appetites are
kind of,
weird, way different than
yeah,
it was in '84. So
maybe now like that's just part of the course, but maybe in 84 it was like much different. But yeah, I didn't find it that weird. I mean, not any more weird than the book is weird, right? Like the book is definitely weird because it has a lot of like this supernatural, religious, kind of stuff happening that you can't really. It's really hard to film, I guess. But I mean, I didn't find the film that I didn't see like David Lynch like putting all sorts of weird quirks in there to make it even more weird. It was kind of weird to see like Tom McLaughlin as Paul. I mean, still kind of weird. But Patrick Stewart worked as Gurney, I think.
I do think the 84 version. So I saw it before I read the book, and I remember thinking it was weird. But now that I've read it and I watch it again, I wonder how many of the gaps my brain would fill in. So maybe it's you know, maybe because I read the book now, it would be better than not having read the book. So I wonder if that's also part of your experiences, because
Yeah, could be.
the
That's
book
right.
is so fresh in your mind. Again, it's probably a good movie. I don't know. I don't remember it, but
But I think Amin brings up a pretty good point. Whether you had problems with the ending or not, like you've now read probably like one of the foundational canons of like Western science fiction. This book has a ton of influence, and I do think, like Priya says, everyone should read it. Or ecological drama, if you don't want to call it science fiction. It is
Yeah,
a
I'm,
very
I'm
significant.
definitely glad we read it. Like it was, yeah, because it's like so influential and so like referenced all the time, and it's just like revered by every science fiction writer, you know, like it's definitely worth reading.
Did you have any trouble with the only part that was a little arresting to me on this reread was when Paul, wakes up from his coma and it turns out has been able to successfully like go to the place within the Bene Gesserit awareness and sort of like does that mind meld with Jessica. That was easier for me to accept when it was Jessica and Aaliyah. Like I was able to accept a connection between Jessica and a fetus because like all those cells were inside her. But it was a little bit harder to imagine that Paul just sort of like touches her and does this telepathy. But maybe I need to broaden my horizons. How did that part land for you guys?
Yeah, I didn't really think about it that much. Yeah, it seemed like at that point, like it's just like there's just so much supernatural stuff happening. You just kind of learn to accept. Like for me, it's accepted it. Like, oh, he's like Kwisatz Haderach now, and like he can just do all this stuff, and like he has basically like the powers of every single other power, right? Like he's just like the combination of every single superpower that someone can have in this world. Like he just has it, and so yeah, I guess like I didn't even really consider it when that happened.
Priya did ask about the shape of the sequels. What I can say about them is there was a part in the end of Dune that I was really looking forward to reading because I really like it. And I reached the end and I couldn't find it. And then I looked through the appendices and I couldn't find them there. And then I realized it's actually in Dune Messiah. So I really had like calced it to the end of this book, which should tell you how much of an epilogue to this book I find Dune Messiah.
And Dune Messiah is the next one
It
because there's
is.
like a million of them, right?
There's 6 written by Frank Herbert and then a bunch of junk ones, but 4 that I've read and feel confident talking about. And I've probably skimmed or began Heretics of Dune and Chapter House of Dune, which are more about the Bene Gesserit than like the core group right here.
So how would you stack them up against Dune itself? Like the first book, like are they better? Do they actually like do they add stuff? Do
How
you
would I stack them up physically? This is Dune right here, and then maybe like an eighth of that would be Dune Messiah, and then another eighth would be Children of Dune, and then God Emperor of Dune. The fourth one is like thicker than the first one.
and I'm not physically, but like how good are they compared to Dune?
What have you heard? Have you been poking around the internet looking
I
for
haven't heard
answers?
anything.
I mean, do you remember anything?
I don't know.
Mm,
I read someone's Quora post on whether or not the question was, do we read the next few books or do we not read? And someone who had read the next few books were like, their opinion was kind of like meh. But they had a really long like paragraphs response as to like I think the main thing was like if you really want to get more out of Paul's character and that's why you want to read further, then don't.
I really, really like God Emperor of Dune. I would read it right now, actually. I go back to it. I think it exists sort of by itself, that you don't necessarily need books 1, 2, and 3. Books 2 and 3 do not stand on their own. They are like continuations of book 1. They pick up thematically and chronologically where this book ends. And yeah, Dan's pretty spoiler averse, so I think that's all I'm really comfortable saying.
Are they more focused on the like religious supernatural stuff, or do like they actually get into like the politics of the galaxy, or both? Or because this book is like a bit more, I would say it's like probably 20% politics and like 80% or 60% like religion and 20% other stuff.
Yeah, I would say that it focuses more narrowly if this book is introducing this universe, this galaxy, and then even in this last chapter, there's this reminder that like, oh, the Bene Gesserit, when they find dangerous individuals, they like hide a secret code word so you can disable them. So a lot of these tricks and schemes are taken for granted as we go into the second and third books, and we start to see how some of those are enacted, like specific plots which take advantage of what's been set up in this universe. And then the political, I really do think that the fourth book is where more of the politics comes into play.
I'm a lot more interested in the politics than any of the religious stuff. Like I could not have if there's like none of like the supernatural religious stuff in this book, like I would like it a lot more.
Are there any big time jumps in the next series of books, or do they all just follow one right after?
There is a 2,000-year time jump.
I hate time jumps.
And yet you recommended The Last of Us to me.
Well, I think that's one time jump, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I think that time jump kind of propels the story.
What about what about this time jump? With the 2-year time jump? Like did that work for you or?
I think in this 2-year time jump, Aaliyah has gone from 2 to 4, right? So she's 4.
But she goes from 0 to 2. Because she wasn't born before the time jump. Yeah. So maybe like less than 2.
Mm-hmm.
0 to 18 months.
Yeah.
0 to like 80 years.
Well, we couldn't have had a fetus or like a newborn stabbing the Baron, so there needed to be progression of some time. So I didn't really even notice the time jump in this one because again, the way it's laid on us is the same way it's laid on Gurney. He's like, by the way, here's my bride, and Gurney's like, okay.
But they also keep talking about like it's kind of like the legend of Muad'Dib, right? Like in that 2-year time frame, like how like I guess he has like his like super soldiers now. What is it, the Fedikan or whatever? I don't know how to pronounce it, but anyway, he has like his like elite unit and his like really like terrorizing the Harkonnens and now like everyone just knows the legend of Muad'Dib, even the Emperor knows about it, right? And so like I think like that's what the 2-year time period is supposed to be more for. And then Paul's also firmly in control of the Fremen at this point because he's been doing it for 2 years and they see his exploits and like they're chanting his name in battle and stuff. So to me, like I thought this time jump worked. I also don't mind time jumps that much depending on the books. Like I also like Foundation a lot and there's lots of time jumps in that one.
True.
I think it depends on what you're getting from the characters after each time jump. So if you feel like you're missing major pieces of that character's life that can enable you to feel a connection to that character, then the time jumps can feel a little bit jarring. Like I remember when I was listening to the Game of Thrones. Has anybody seen the new House of the Dragon? That has a lot of time jumps and like these same characters come back to you at the end of every time jump and you kind of miss a whole lot of living that they did, a whole lot of character development because they're different people obviously after like 10 years have passed or like 20 years have passed or 15 or whatever, and you kind of don't you have to reorient yourself, and then after a few episodes go by, of course, like then you are like, okay, I see who this person is now, but it's a little bit jarring at first because you're like, what exactly happened that this drastic of a change happened in the character? You can put the pieces together based on what life situation they're in now, but these time jumps sort of like, because you also start to feel an attachment to the character as they were before the time jump, and then it kind of places you in a position of unfamiliarity with the character afterwards. So that's my only issue with time jumps. Like sometimes they have to happen, of course, but especially when you have a character like Paul who's becoming more and more disconnected from the ability to emotionally process things, that becomes a problem for me.
Yeah, I think like this like this 2-year time jump also kind of not let us see the relationship between Paul and Chani grow and whatever. Like they're just like, oh, we're married now, we have a kid, or whatever. But they're together and they have a kid, right? And he's like deeply in love with her, like, and we don't get to see those moments. So I definitely see what you're coming from on that one.
Yeah, those deep feelings between Chaney and Paul don't feel earned because we don't really have any insights into how these feelings developed. And it almost seems more of a function of prophecy where Paul saw her in his future and then he saw her in real life and he was like, oh, yep, this is my girl. And then he just kind of, launched into a relationship with her without an actual development of feelings. And then you just accept for face value that, oh, he has real actual feelings for her. The same with his son. I had the question, like, has he even met his son? Because it seems like he's never in the same physical location as his son at any point.
Yeah, he might not have.
Oh, like he just sent Chini desert for the whole of her pregnancy and then for safety. That's actually very likely.
Yeah. His mother did, but yeah, he might not have because he's out there fighting the Harkonnens the whole 2 years. So yeah, maybe.
Yeah, he's been on a battle campaign. That's not a place you bring a newborn. So I think Priya's right.
Maybe that's why he doesn't care.
Oh well, poor little Leto.
Yeah. So one question I had for probably everybody is what was your favorite part of the book in general? Not just this section, but of this book.
I don't know that I necessarily had a favorite part, but I agree with you, Dan. I thought the non-religious parts were more engaging and interesting than the religious parts. So the best parts were the parts without all the mythology in it, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. I have to think about the best part of the book was.
By mythology, I mean like world building,
Yeah,
like rooted in quote unquote reality.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that.
How about you, Talia?
So no particular character or plot point, but the themes that Frank Herbert's exploring in Dune. So power and politics, and focusing on how individuals like Paul and Leto and Jessica and institutions like the Guild and the Bene Gesserit and the Fremen manipulate and wield power to subvert or maintain control. Delving into those ideas of leadership and governance and consequence. Definitely I have more tolerance for the religion and spirituality, although less so in this book and more in the fourth book, which, as the title God Emperor of Dune alerts, there's more about religion and spirituality in that one. And I think most importantly and most interestingly to me is the ecology. And that's why I do often pitch this book, not just in terms of science fiction, but in terms of an ecological drama. The importance of ecology and environmentalism and the interdependence of humans and their environment, the consequences of human actions and the empowerment of humans to change the entire surface of a planet, and the need for sustainable practices to ensure the survival, and how that society changes when those practices change, was probably one of my favorite themes that's not fully fleshed out and it's not answered for you. I don't think any of these themes are answered for us by Frank Herbert, but I'm grateful that he brings them up in such a pivotal way in this defining book that he wrote.
That actually reminds me, I thought the terraforming aspect was going to be a bigger part of this book. Maybe it's in the future books or whatever. Maybe he's setting it up for. I don't know if he ever meant it to be like a million books, right? However many books it is. But they put a lot of work into the terraforming aspect of it, and it doesn't pay off at all. We don't see anything with that besides them having big stashes of water, right?
Yeah, and Talia's much better answer than mine made me think of something else that I did like about this book. I do like the way the book ends in that it's almost circular. It starts with this whole bureaucratic change of government kind of thing, and it feels like it's ending on a very bureaucratic note as well. Starts with the whole idea of concubines and closes with that as well. And I thought that was, a bunch of nonsense happens in the middle, but I do like it when authors and creators are able to connect the beginnings and the end. So I guess I appreciated that about this as well.
How about you, Freya?
If I'm to give a less intellectual answer, I enjoyed reading the parts with the Baron because I think that they're enjoyable to read. I feel like as much as he is an evil guy, it's almost like you're being taken a little bit behind the scenes of what's going on because you're getting so much of Paul and Jessica's perspective and the Fremen perspective. When you get to see the Baron's perspective, you get to really get inside the head of the villain, and you realize that he's kind of like this almost like comical figure. Like you can't really take him seriously, and yet he has defeated the Duke and he has exerted himself in a position of a lot of control. So I found that kind of enjoyable to read. His dialogue with Phaedra was particularly enjoyable. With the ecology aspects that Talia is talking about, I completely agree. And there's also another aspect that was brought into this section in particular that I enjoyed, which was the idea of mutually assured destruction. Because, of course, if you destroy the spice, you're destroying the Fremen in the process. But you're kind of destroying everyone who relies on the spice, not just Fremen. So it's kind of a gamble to just say, hey, we're going to say we'll destroy the spice, which will also destroy us, and they'll actually not call our bluff on that. They'll believe us. And the confidence with which Paul executes that kind of reminded me of Luo G, who's just like 100%. What was his like confidence rating? It was like above like 90% or
Yeah, it
something.
was definitely in the 90s. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was in the 90s. It wasn't quite 100, but it was in the 90s.
Yeah, it wasn't Wade level, but it was
The
it was pretty
confidence
high.
level. Yeah.
Yeah.
Call it what it is. It's swagger.
Yep. Yep. True.
Yeah, I mean, I've made no secret that I also like the Baron chapters. I think they're the most interesting. I think my favorite part of the book, though, was the fall of Arakeen. The actual like machinations of Leto getting killed and the tooth and everything. Just like the coordination of all this stuff that happened to take down the Atreides family. I think was really well written, and it was like surprising that it happened like when it did to me. Like, I mean, it makes sense, like in the scope of the book, like it made sense, like that it happened then, because most of the book is like more focused on Paul's like rise to power and becoming the Muad'Dib and everything. But you know, I had no knowledge of any of that stuff. So the kind of the whole sequence of Arakeen falling to the Harkonnen, that was like probably my favorite part of the book.
I also liked Paul and Gurney's like little competition moment of like who has been harmed by Harkonnens the most, who
Right.
has more beef with the Harkonnens.
Right. Yeah, like Gurney like, yeah, like you owe me a Harkonnen. He's like, well, yeah.
Yeah, I honestly thought like Gurney had more of a claim to this because he was like, I was raised in like a slave pit. And Paul was
Right.
like, well, they killed my father. So
Yeah, and my son. But
Yeah.
yeah. Like slave pit, son you've never even met.
actually, was it even the Harkonnens that killed his son? It was the Emperor, right? The Emperor is the one that sent the Sardaukar to to get them. And maybe like
Great
maybe
side, I see.
Yeah.
yeah.
I swear, like this poor little kid has just become like an afterthought in his mind.
Who even killed him? I don't know. Someone probably the Harkonnens.
How
Yeah.
did you? I really liked I mean, I feel like my sleeper favorite character who doesn't recur very much and it's a very small character is Count Fenring. And I love that he really just seems to be so savvy. I kind of wish he had a bigger role because he's the only one who, if we're to believe him as a reliable narrator, he like, I could kill this guy. Like the Emperor did give me the nod and I actually have the power. I could kill Paul. And I think that he's smart and doesn't get to play a role in the Bene Gesserits the same way, but he is like the only friend of the Padishah Emperor. So it's the closest we get to sort of understanding the Emperor himself because we never really get to hear from the Emperor at all. So in the same way that the Baron is sort of like how behind the scenes from Paul and Jessica, our only peek into the Emperor's court is through this one character.
I mean, the best character is definitely the guy who asks for the recipes over and over again.
Yeah, I promised you he'd become a pivotal character. He'd be very important to the end.
I mean,
Now
he's
you
the real
see.
Muad'Dib.
Now you see.
um
Why was he
I
such a big character in that one banquet scene?
I agree. I wanted to learn more about Count Fenring because we also learned in one of the excerpts to like the openers to one of the chapters in the previous section that he was the one who was the closest to the emperor. And then so you would think that this is like his right hand man, right? And then the emperor tells him to do one thing in this entire book, one thing. Go kill the Duke. And he's like, nope,
Isn't that what
no
Irulan wrote
can
about?
do.
He once didn't kill a man, and that's how.
Yeah. So now we find that out, but we're like, okay, what was their relationship, the nature of their relationship, like up to that point? And you get some insight into that based off of how pissed off the emperor is that he didn't do that. I also enjoy the fact that like um it was not until this section that we actually get an insight into what he looks like. And Paul notices, didn't he say he looks like a weaselly man? So I was like, and you also found out in this section that he's a eunuch. So you imagine this like small little weaselly man, but yet you know that he has had tremendous influence in some way, shape, or form. So it's pretty interesting. And also he's evil looking. So there's that.
Many eunuchs in China were very, very influential. They were allowed to be close to emperors because they didn't pose the same kind of threat that other men did. They usually got to write the history and tend to all the. Anyway, I won't get into a lesson on Chinese history right now, but yeah, I agree. It's interesting to see him. Wish we saw more.
I was looking on Reddit and someone said that they felt like the last book was very rushed. And then someone commented and they were like, it wasn't rushed. If you read the future, like the next few books, you'll realize like it was exactly as it should have been. And he's setting you up for those books. And I was like, but like people aren't gonna read those books if they don't like feel satisfied with like the way this one ended. So
I hate to say it, but I really do agree because if you just stop now, the good guys win the end, and we sort of get to see what happens like after ever after. What happens after the good guys win is conquest the same as good governance, and what do you do with this empire that you inherit? And I don't know. I can't defend his choice to make it this way, but it does make sense if you read the future books.
I mean, hopefully they expand the world off of Arrakis a little bit because like Arrakis is like sort of interesting, but I'm like more interested in like the universe as a whole, right? And like seeing all these. I mean, there's a lot of different planets, and like the spice like enables them to travel between them, really fast, by floating space. So I'm interested in that. The kind of exploration of the universe aspect of the world.
also, we have now all seen, I think we've all seen the trailer for the upcoming Dune film.
Yep.
Do you think this is going to be a three-part series for the film? Because I feel like it's kind of a stretch to make a whole entire movie in book two and then a whole entire movie in book three, or part three. But I mean, they could do it. I'm sure that they can do it. I'm sure that they can. If there are people who are podcasting and doing an entire, podcast on one chapter at a time, and also we saw with the series, the Remembrance of Earth's Past, Three Body Problem, the
Yeah.
Chinese series,
30 episodes.
they have 30 episodes on just book one. So anything is doable, but I don't agree that they should. Yes, Talia, I don't think that they should have broken book 7 of Harry Potter into 2 parts. It's always stupid when they do that. They shouldn't have broken The Hobbit into 3
So
parts. That is one
stupid.
book.
Harry Potter
Yeah.
and a very long camping trip did not need to be a movie. Absolutely.
No, and the series needs to not happen as well on HBO.
Don't even tell me, don't put that sand in my ears right now. I didn't know about that, and I've learned about it against my will. But I hope they don't make 3 books for book 1 of Dune, because like I said, the only reason I enjoyed the 2021 version is because I understood what was happening. I thought without context of having read the book, it would feel very detached from reality. It's just like a nice soundscape where there's a little bit of action, but it doesn't seem to build on itself to me. Also, by the time they finish it, Timothy Chalamet will no longer look like a 15-year-old boy. So I don't think that's a good idea.
What are you talking about? He's always going to look 15. He's immortal. He's a vampire.
Didn't calculate that in. Thank you, Priya.
Little known fact.
My guess would be like they're gonna have just the second movie be the end of this book, like, and maybe like if it's like popular enough, then maybe if the sequels are good enough, like that they'll continue making them. Maybe, I don't know, but I would guess they're just gonna continue it to the end of this book. But there's not that much. I mean, like it seemed like they did like what 60. They did until the time jump, basically, right? Like they did the first almost 2 books, right? What was the first one? The first one was called Dune. The second one's called Muad'Dib, right? And then the third one's a Prophet. So
Yeah.
it seems like they did like at least 60 to 70% of the first book and the first movie. It's gonna be a lot of just like an hour of like riding worms or whatever.
Priya, your discussion question. It's time to shine.
My discussion. Which one? I had several.
Priya looked up discussion questions, and I think the one she found and shared with us is, do you think you could ride a worm? Which is not my takeaway from this novel, but someone put it on the internet.
I'm pretty sure if I hit the gym for an entire year, I could probably ride a worm.
I am not coordinated enough to ride a worm.
I'm being sarcastic. I could never.
I thought I could ride a
Will
horse.
ever be tested, so I'm gonna say, yeah, I can handstand on a worm.
Yeah, prove me wrong.
Right?
You need to have the right hooks, though. Like,
Yeah.
handmade by Fremen.
How would you, I think Dan had this question, like, was this about ranking Remembrance of Earth's Past against Dune, or is it against everything that we've read together as co-hosts?
I mean, just any book, any series. I mean, like, yeah, like we've read now 3 big science fiction, epic, series or whatever. And I'm sure we've all, Priya's read all the Harry Potter ones, and I read all the Song of Ice and Fire ones, and I'm sure we've all read our fair share of series. So I'm just wondering, like, now that we've read like such a seminal piece of science fiction, like how do we rank it among those things, and like where would you put it among the series that you've read?
In terms of lore, nothing beats Lord of the Rings. Sorry, but it's just in terms of series, it's the as Stephen Colbert said, it's the #1 trilogy. It will always be. But if we're to compare against sci-fi, I think in terms of what I've recently read of sci-fi, I don't think it. I'm sorry, but I don't think it tops Remembrance of Earth's Past, because I just remember, like, when I picked up those books, I could not put them down. Like, I could not for the life of me, like, stop reading until, like, I was pulling all-nighters reading, and that hasn't happened in a really long time. So I was like reading through into the night. So I think that still has my whole heart.
How about you? I mean, you didn't read Foundation with us, but you probably read other stuff.
I think this was fine. I will say that I appreciated Talia on this a lot. I think her knowledge of the book and the series made me appreciate it more than I think I would have had I just read it, on vacation or whenever people read. I don't know. It's not the worst thing I ever read. It's not the best thing I ever read. I agree about Lord of the Rings being great. Yeah, I don't know. It was fine. I give it a B.
Yeah, for me personally, I would probably put it behind definitely Remembrance of Earth's Path would be like the first one. Like that's the whole reason we started this thing. I was like, I want to talk about that. And I Gary, I couldn't put it down. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I would probably put Foundation above this too. I really like Foundation. I know you guys probably don't agree with that, but I was super into it. I was into it enough where I read the books after it, even though we weren't going to record them. And still reading Asimov books. I agree with me too. Like if Talia hadn't given us all this like extra knowledge, and I was reading on my own, I might have just given up, because I was so lost the first time I read it. Like, and I think I said as much on their first episode. Like I was just like totally lost on what was happening, who was what. Like it was too much immersion for me. But yeah, Talia kept us grounded with information, and so like yeah, and I think by the end of it, I did like the book. Yeah, I grew to understand the kind of world and appreciate the politics. And it was a little bit too much supernatural religious stuff for me. But I mean, overall, like I did like it. But I would probably put it behind those other two.
I've read a fair amount of pretty average science fiction and fantasy books, like The Martian, or basically anything by Andy Weir. Ready Player One, which actually is just outright bad. And then some books that I actually enjoyed but didn't leave a big impression on me, like Ender's Game, which I read quite a while ago, and I'm not sure if it would hold up, or anything else by Ernest Cline. Dune is one that has stayed relevant to me, and I still do think of when people talk about my favorite science fiction books. But again, I would have to agree with Dan that Remembrance of Earth's Past is something that comes to my mind when people talk about books, like not even just within a specific genre. I still think about them, still read them, and again, they are the reason we started this podcast. But Dune has a special place for me because of how strongly there are people who do feel so strongly about this book. My copy of Dune was given to me by a friend who said, like, I'm evangelizing you. I'm going to give you my copy. I need you to read this book. And I think that's very sweet. And it's not beyond the pale that I could, give away my copy of Dune and let someone else go on this adventure. Oh, no, not Ernest Cline. Sorry. Orson Scott Card wrote Ender's Game. I'm mixing up my names.
That's been on my list to read. And then now that you say that, I won't be getting to it anytime soon. But
I read it as an adolescent, so please just take it with a grain of salt when you read
that's a good disclaimer. So I will add one more thing, which is that when I started reading Dune, I felt that it was giving me more than what the movie was giving me. And then as I read further into the book, I felt like I hope the movie makes this, and this part feel and look and sound cooler, or like makes it more engaging for the viewer than how it's coming across on page. And I think that speaks to certain moments feeling anticlimactic, like, hey, Paul is incapacitated for 3 weeks, and then Chaney comes in and makes him take a little whiff of water and he is back to life. And why did Jessica
an hour? That would be fine.
I hope they just get rid of it. Like, they should just not have that part. It would be better if like they just
he
get
has
rid
to
of the whole
change
subplot.
The water of life to prove that he's like a male Bene Gesserit.
Or yeah, but you could do that without being almost dead for 3 weeks.
Yeah,
because it makes like I couldn't after a certain point I couldn't with Jessica's character. Like I couldn't, because like she just has so much like knowledge that has been poured into her of like generations of Reverend Mothers, and so much power that I feel like her daughter, who's like 2 years old, is like way cooler than Jessica now. And like she has like already outsmarted, outwitted her mother. Like, and it makes me wonder, like, there is a consistency to Jessica's character that I was not getting from the further we went in the book. So why didn't she figure out how to revive Paul? Like, she has all this like knowledge at her disposal. She's like, I just had this insight that Chaney was the woman for the job. And like, that's why I called you. I don't know why, but yeah, it seems like they fit her character into the plot. They, as in Frank Herbert, he uses her character in different ways based off how it fits that particular plot moment versus a consistency throughout. That's my gripe with her character at that point, by the time the book ends, if that makes sense.
A fair criticism. If a character is really, really well written and someone tells you like an action or a quote, you should be able to say like, oh, that's such an, X thing to do or say. And if you can't do that, that's challenging. But I will probably update my rehydrate.space profile with like other book series that I do recommend having read Dune so recently, probably The Expanse, definitely A Wrinkle in Time for other explorations. But yeah, it's not something to be taken lightly. I do think that even if you don't read all of Dune, you should read the first book. That's my take on it.
All right. Well, I think we can stop there. I appreciate everyone joining us this season. Thanks to my 3 co-hosts for all of your insights and sticking with it over this extended time frame of reading. I know we had a lot of scheduling issues and stuff, so appreciate the listeners sticking with us. And thanks for listening. Please check out rehydrate.space for release episodes, reading lists, and all the other stuff we put up there. Leave comments by emailing us at rehydrate@fastmail.com, on Twitter at rehydratepod, or on Mastodon at rehydrate@mas.to. And we don't know what we're doing next season, but when we do, we'll make sure to put it on those outlets, and please join us then. Thanks.